Staging is marketing. That's all it is. And so we always say, like, we're your marketing team that's going to help you promote and advertise your property. It is our job to really be thinking about the architectural features of your home and make sure we're showcasing that.
Hello and welcome to episode 291 of the Smart Agents Podcast. As always, my name is Michael Walter and I'll be your host. On today's episode, I'm joined by Alisa Sparks, founder of Linden, a nationally expanding home staging and interior design franchise. After starting her career managing multi-million-dollar military budgets, Alisa transitioned into real estate and built a staging company that now serves markets across the country. Throughout our conversation, we discuss how staging impacts buyer psychology, why emotional connection matters when marketing listings, and how agents can use staging to help homes stand out in today's shifting market. Alisa also shares how she scaled Linden through systems and processes, and how agents can do the same with their own companies. But before we get into the day's featured interview, if you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe to the Smart Agents Podcast. We stream at all major podcasting platforms such as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, and YouTube. All right, let's get into our conversation with Alisa Sparks. If you'd like to connect with her or learn more about Linden, be sure to check out the links in the episode description. All right, well, really the way I like to start everything out is if you could just introduce yourself to us a little bit. Tell us who you are and where you are joining us from.
Absolutely. I am Alisa Sparks. I'm the owner and founder of Linden, which is a home staging and interior design franchise. We are scattered now throughout the country, and I'm based here out of Raleigh, North Carolina.
Awesome. So kind of give me a little bit of background on yourself, because the staging and home design wasn't the first, career, correct?
It was not. I think, like most in this real estate industry that are tied there somehow. My background is actually in finance. Went to school for finance, spent nearly a decade managing multi-million-dollar budgets for the naval helicopter and aircraft programs, and had a blast doing it. I'm a numbers nerd at heart, but I held my real estate license during that time, and couldn't get enough of real estate. So I would find the ugliest house that I could get my hands on. I would renovate it for 2 years. And once she was done and beautiful, put her on the market, sell it. And I was like itching for the next project. And so even in this former corporate career, real estate has always been a big part of my life.
Excellent. So tell me, going from, I guess, really, and what was it that got you really interested in the design? Was it, getting your properties, kind of designing them, getting them to look, their best?
Yeah, for me, I always had this creative itch. And so even though I love numbers, I found myself outside of my 9 to 5 just dying to do something creative. So I would watch or read design blogs. I would look at design magazines and just study how beautiful images were made, like what made a space stunning and beautiful. And I would find these little patterns and start to recognize things. Like oftentimes they pair 3 objects together. Oftentimes there's a playing on different textures and materials. And I would test those ideas out in my own home and find that I could kind of replicate a similar look and feel and design. And so I had this love and passion for all things creative, but I didn't have an interior design degree. And so I had this belief that I could never be an interior designer. And so real estate was sort of my scapegoat, if you will, and my outlet for all things creative. And I had renovated a home, put it on the market. And the feedback we got when we were listing the home is the staging was really good. But it wasn't staging. It was my furniture that I had collected over the years and really created and put together. But it was this aha moment for me of maybe I thought I couldn't be an interior designer, but I bet I could stage houses. You don't need a degree or certification for that. There could be potential there. And that's really was the impetus and the starting point for Linden.
That's awesome. So I guess, I would love to dive into kind of starting that. So how did that all begin? Where did you start, kind of marketing yourself as a home stager, and how did this kind of start growing?
Yeah, I am very risk averse. And so I props to those individuals and business owners that are like, I just took a jump and I did it. That was not me. I was like, this is a cool idea, but is it going to work? And so I invested, I think at the time it was like $400. I hired a professional photographer to come and photograph my home. I put it into marketing material and I said, this is what staging can do for your space. And I would take Fridays off of my regular job. I would take PTO. And on Fridays, I would go and try to get in front of as many real estate agents and builders as I could just to see if there was market fit, to see if people said, yes, this is something I would be interested in. And I started to get yeses. And then on Fridays, I would go and I would run my installs. So I would go to a property, I would stage it and get it all set up. And about 4 months into this process, I hit a place where I went, there's a lot of growth happening. So I either need to quit my full-time job and jump now, or I need to just say, that was a really fun run, but I'm not willing to make that leap of faith. And for me, I was ready to leap. And so I think a lot of the confidence that I had in it was that there was evidence that there was market fit. I had started to build a client base. I had a book of business that was successful before I left my safe career and made this full transition.
Right. And it obviously has worked out quite well.
Yeah, yes. Wouldn't do it any other way.
Right. So I'd love to kind of pivot a little bit to, the staging and what that can do for, the agents and the home sellers out there that, are looking to put their homes on the market, and just kind of how it's maybe evolved over the years, staging. Cause I think people that don't necessarily like understand it, there's a lot to it to really make sure that a home is staged properly.
Yeah, absolutely. What's interesting is staging is not decorating. Staging is not design. It comes off that way because we're playing with furniture and pillows and colors. But staging is marketing. That's all it is. And so we always say, like, we're your marketing team that's going to help you promote and advertise your property. It is our job to really be thinking about the architectural features of your home and make sure we're showcasing that. And so when we walk into a property, we don't go, hey, how can I make this pretty? And here's where the furniture would go. We think about first and foremost how an MLS photograph is going to be taken in every single room, because that is the first moment that somebody's going to interact with your home is online. And so if there's a corner that's not going to be seen in that photo, I care a lot less about that corner. I care about the wow moment and that impact that they're going to see when they first lay eyes on the living room, for example. And then we think about the second step is when they first walk in that door, what are the buyers walking into? What are their sight lines? What do they see? What do they not see? We've had interesting scenarios before where a real estate agent calls and says, hey, house has been sitting on the market empty for 9 months. It's not selling. I don't know what to do. The kitchen is too small. That's the feedback I'm getting. And they're like, I don't know what else to do. So I'm just calling you. Would staging help? And, as a stager, I'm not going to make your kitchen bigger. I'm not going to go do a full renovation, right, and size that up. But what's interesting is when you stage a home, all of a sudden you're telling a story in the space. All of a sudden, what happens is it changes the way that a buyer interacts with a home. They go from this is a checklist of, yes, there's a great living room. Yes, there's a kitchen. It has the gas stove I wanted, to now making memories in the space. And so they walk in and they go, this is the living room where I'm going to spend Friday nights watching movies with the kids and the family, right? This is the kitchen where we're going to cook our favorite family dish. And when that changes to an emotional experience and creating and building memories, everything changes. And so when we go back to the story of this kitchen that was too small, I said, listen, let's stage it, because what it's going to do is it's going to change the way that a buyer interacts with the home when they walk in. And sure enough, in 4 days, the house went under contract. And not because the kitchen got bigger, but because it changed the way that buyers were experiencing the home when they walked in.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I definitely, even when I think about my own, when my wife and I bought our house, it was a new build. So we, did the whole model and everything like that. And, it was really hard as the home was being built to kind of picture things. And room seems small because you're just looking at the studs going up and you really can't get an idea of how a life fits inside those four walls.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you say the rooms feel small, because what's counterintuitive is when there's no furniture in a room, the room actually feels and is perceived as smaller. But once you put furniture in, it gets bigger. And sometimes people are like, that feels like it should be in reverse. And so bringing furniture in, showing how a space is used is really, really powerful in any home.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of times people having a hard time understanding, the scale of things, like, how big that furniture actually really is, or how much space do I really need, to be able to fit everything in here. And I think that is one thing that we definitely struggled with. We had to do the whole tape things down on the floor to kind of figure out when we were buying our furniture. But tell me about, how much, demographics, the buyer demographics kind of go into the staging of a property. So, the lifestyle that you are perceiving in a home kind of fits that buyer pool.
Yeah, that's a great question. So it's important to recognize that when you are selling a home, and you stage it, it's not about the seller and the seller's preferences. We want to think about who's coming in next. So one of the exercises that we do every time we get a new listing or property is before we ever step foot in the house, we look around the neighborhood and we pay attention. Who's walking around on the sidewalk? Who's grabbing their mail? What are these typical neighborhood owners? Because that's likely who's going to be purchasing the home. And so what's interesting is we find that neighborhoods oftentimes change their demographic over time. You'll find people that are neighborhoods that are family-friendly homes, right? They have lots of kids. Well, when they start to age out of that, kids move out of the house, they become empty nesters. Oftentimes they sell their 5-bedroom home because they don't need 5 bedrooms anymore, and a new young family is coming in. And so we first want to identify like who is it that's going to purchase this ideal home? And then the second piece is what is their design aesthetic? Because one thing that we know is that empty nesters and baby boomers, they tend to lean more traditional. They tend to like warmer colors and cleaner lines. We know that families really want to focus on the functionality of being able to be a family in a home. So we got to think function first. And their colors can be a little bit more bold and on trend. And we know that those that are younger, that are in their maybe 20s, want something that's a little more hip, a little bit more modern. And so, even just when we look at age, before we look at the architecture of the home, all of that's going to actually impact our design choices as we're staging.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the whole idea of, the moment that you decide to list your home, it is no longer your home. You've got to think,
Yeah.
as the buyer, that I think that I've had a lot of conversations lately that we've really been driving that home is, that idea that once you decide to list your home, it is no longer how you like, your furniture set or what your use for this room is particularly.
Yeah, and sometimes that's a tough conversation. I oftentimes like to say, if I'm going to move out of my house, there are things I have to change in my own home, and I do this for a living because your home is supposed to be a personal reflection of who you are. For years, I had a pink front door, and I loved it. But is a pink front door for everybody? No, I'm going to turn off so many buyers because most people don't love pink the way I do. And so recognizing that your home is going to have a season where it's a reflection of you, and then your home has to kind of become depersonalized and it has to be a marketing tool and appeal to the masses. And so that's going to change the way you are working and functioning in a space.
Right. And you touched on it earlier, that first kind of through the front door, what the buyer is going to look at. What are some of the other like main places that, agents need to make sure that they are getting staging done for their properties?
Yeah, there are two that I think oftentimes get missed that are really important to me. Everybody knows the focal rooms, your living, dining, kitchen, right? We got that. Primary bedroom is one that unfortunately I've watched people sometimes say, hey, I want to save some money. Let's not do it in here. And I think a primary bedroom is one of the most important spaces purely for the reason that you mentioned earlier is it's hard to really understand the capacity and space of a room. One of my favorite things to do when I walk into a bedroom is I measure 7 feet from the wall. 7 feet is typically about the size of your bed after your footboard and your headboard. And when I lay it down on the floor with a realtor or a home buyer, whoever it might be, I say, this is where my bed is going to end. Look at how much more space there is. You have space for a dresser and a bench, and there's space for chairs over there. And usually the response is, wow, I did not realize how much I could actually fit in this room. And so I think oftentimes the primary bedroom is a massive missed opportunity if you're not staging it because it's going to be perceived as so much smaller than it really is. The second space that often gets overlooked is an outdoor space. We worry about the square footage inside our home. We forget that outside is like free square footage oftentimes, right? And so optimizing and showing that as another functioning space is really important as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm in Florida, so we are, everybody has their backyard with the, ours is a covered lanai. We're looking at, expanding things out. But when you first purchase, like in our neighborhood, when you first purchase, it's a pretty small, covered area. And I think depending on the furniture, we made the mistake. We had too big of a table in there. It just felt really cramped. We opened things up. And I think depending on what is out there, you can really get some different, show different lifestyle different lifestyles that you could have with that back area.
Absolutely. Let it be an extension of your home.
Yeah. What when it comes to the different maybe some trends that have that are more prevalent now, that just kind of how staging has evolved, I guess, really. What how has that changed over the years?
It's interesting. Staging evolves the way that we as individuals live in our home. And so, a really good example of this is when COVID happened. It changed how everyone lived in their home. And all of a sudden, I remember finding myself needing to design office spaces in every house. It didn't matter if you didn't have an office, it was like find somewhere in the living room
Right.
to stick a desk because people need to know where they're going to work from home, right? And so I think it's an ever evolving conversation in terms of what staging needs to do. Early on 20 years ago, when you walk into staged properties, everything was very poised and pinned up and perfect. It felt like you were walking into a hotel or a museum. Now I think we're moving into a more relaxed version of what it is. People want to walk into their home and feel like it's home. They want to kind of breathe and exhale and let their shoulders down and feel like they can function because this is where they're really going to be. And so we're seeing a lot of trends and styles move sort of towards that. Furniture is now becoming more curved. We're seeing some changes in design trends where there's lots of curves happening, where everything used to be very tight and square. And then we're seeing a lot of warm tones coming in today. We were in a version where gray was it, gray and white was everything, right? And now we're coming and swinging back into some color and some pattern and warmth and brown tones, which was like the no word 10 years ago. And so it's interesting to see the way these design trends change.
Yeah, absolutely. And I relate to the home office. This was actually a bedroom prior, and COVID hit. I actually installed a little folding table, and my son was doing his virtual school sitting behind me, and then our business, we shut down our brick and mortar, and this is where I'm at now. So finally, it took a little while, but we made it a full functioning office. But yeah, I definitely see people, the need for having, being able to see that space is
And
definitely
there
here.
are so many like you that, COVID happened, but it hasn't changed. They still have the opportunity to work remote, or they've decided to take their business and move it to working from home. And so the need for office space is so crucial still today when we think about and design and stage a home.
Yeah. You talked a lot of, you also mentioned how important staging is with those listing photos. And I think that's, when I'm scrolling the different listings, my eye is definitely drawn more towards the listing photos that have furniture, that I can see what the different uses for the room can be.
Yeah, photography is hugely important. That is your first interaction with a listing. And so if you can showcase how something is going to be used, if you can showcase scale and give a visual representation of a design style, you are already a step ahead of your competition. And we're in a market today. The real estate market is shifting. There is a little bit more tension. Houses are not flying off the market, $200,000 over asking within hours and, 12 offers like we had a few years ago, right? And that's a good thing. But now you're in this season where, as a seller, you need to make sure that you are putting your best foot forward, that you're really optimizing and capturing as much of the value of your home as you possibly can. And that first shot is going to be that photograph.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit about, I think there's so many, and I can see it when I go on the different listings, but there's a lot of virtual staging out there
Yeah.
now. But I have to imagine, like I can, if I look at the listing and I see that, see something's virtually staged, but then I go visit it, there's like that disconnect between what I saw online and what I'm seeing. So how important is that, like, physical staging, that so it's there when the buyers walk in?
Yeah, it's hugely important. So virtual staging is great at getting people in the door. I will say that. What I hear oftentimes as feedback from real estate agents is they saw it virtually staged, they pulled up to the house, and they were actually frustrated and disappointed. Because oftentimes, when a buyer is looking for a property, they aren't just looking at one house in one day. They have scoured through, they've looked at tons of listings online. They've maybe picked their top three. They don't remember what the photos look like. So they're not in their brain going, oh, yeah, I remember this is where the couch goes and this is how this plays out. they're just walking into an empty home. And what ends up happening is two things. One, they're not making the memories when they're in that space. They're not building that emotional connection. And what we know is that buyers buy homes on emotion more than anything else. And so we've missed that opportunity. But the other danger of it is if there is the littlest imperfection in your home, that's what they're going to see. And so if there's a little bit of a stain on the carpeting, if there's a ding or a scuff on the wall because real life happens and you forgot to touch something up, those are the things that are going to be noticed. And now all of a sudden it says your house is not well maintained, it's not cared for, and it's quickly losing valuation rather than creating the memories, building those emotions, and then bringing it to closure.
Right. And you mentioned, you just touched on it with like the scuff on the wall and things like that. When it comes to staging, how, obviously when somebody's putting their home on the market, if they do have that electric pink wall or something like that, they should probably go ahead and paint that. But
Yeah.
in the case that, how do you work with the existing, aesthetic of a home sometimes?
Yeah, so definitely recommend paint if possible. That's a big win. But I have been in projects where, the buyer is just adamant, I'm not going to invest the money in it. Or maybe it's a home that's going to need a massive renovation. And so they go, I'm not going to start some of the renovation now. An example of this, we actually staged a property last year that had yellow walls and green carpeting. I wish that I was making this up, but I was not. And we were like, okay, if staging works, this is going to be the true test, right? And what's fascinating is this house sold within days at market value. And the simple fact that that happened was nothing short of a miracle. But it's amazing again to say like, you would have walked into this room and your eyes would cringe a little bit and go, what is this? And can't get past it. But then for us, it comes down to like, we need to create something neutral and we need to tell the story. And so we brought in all the neutral whites and linens and beiges and any color we could to kind of tone things down, a rug to help cover up the green carpeting. We told a story about it being a beautiful office. We put beautiful things on the built-ins and all of a sudden it changed the entire conversation of the room. And so I would say, yes, please paint if possible, but if you are going to do something, they say the biggest return on investment for a property, number one is cleaning and decluttering. So do that. Number two is staging. And I've seen that in action again and again. So if your budget is tight and you go, what do I pick and choose? Staging is a worthwhile investment.
Yeah, absolutely. Kind of switching gears a little bit. Tell me about how the business itself has grown. You mentioned, that it is now, across the country. It's not, just locally to where you're at, but kind of how that all happened and how it's been growing.
Yeah, absolutely. So I started Linden Creek 8 years ago. I had no intention of doing anything outside of here we are locally in Raleigh and loving it. But about 5 years into the business, found myself in a position where my team was running all of the day-to-day operations. They were very good at it. My clients were happy. Everybody was supported. And it was this like aha moment of like, what do I do? They don't need me. And what is the next step? And what does this look like? And as I was sort of in this season of just reflecting on what I wanted to do next, because I was so happy with what we had built, I was getting messages from other home stagers, other interior designers asking about how we store our artwork or how we handle pricing objections or some of these just different aspects of the business behind the scenes that we had really created systems for over the years. And it was a moment for me where I reflected. A friend of mine said, "Hey, have you thought about franchising?" And honestly, he said that, and I went, "I can't. This is a creative industry. Like you can't franchise. This isn't making burgers. Like there's no way to franchise this." And then I couldn't be more wrong, clearly. But I really paused and reflected on it, and I realized we had a system for the way we were designing. So whether it was me in a home or one of my designers or stylists, there was consistency across the board in what we were doing because of the systems we created. And I remember being madly in love with what my day-to-day looked like. I loved my team. I loved the work-life balance. I loved, the income that I was making from it. All of that was really beautiful. And I remember thinking, there are probably other people out there in the world like me that are in their corporate positions that want to make this jump, that are terrified and have no idea how to do it. And I figured something out. So if I can give them a playbook, give them a competitive edge and go, here, let me give you everything I've ever learned, take it and you run with it, they're going to get there faster. And so that was really what brought on the idea of franchising. We started with just one location on purpose. And for the first year, we just watched her. I wanted to make sure that she would be successful, that we could actually replicate this. And I wanted to know the good, the bad, the ugly. I wanted to know what worked, what didn't work, where her pain points were, where her shortcomings were, so that I could fix it. And at the end of the 12 months, she looked up and she had 3x'd the sales I did in my first year.
Oh,
And I remember just being blown away and thinking, this actually works. And there were so many mistakes that she did not make that I made
right.
that I remember thinking like there was so much value in being able to have this. And so from there, we decided to really expand the opportunity. So today we've got 24 locations across the country, primarily across the East Coast and as far west as Texas, and are having a great time as a community, just building and supporting our clients.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, our audience base is real estate agents, brokers, and a lot of times, there's people that we've encountered through, our audience that are, they're listening and they want to look into expanding their business, maybe go from that solo agent that's been really successful, but is maybe scared to bring on other people and kind of go through that, that teaching process. But talk to me a
Yeah.
little bit about, and you said it, is creating those systems and processes that you can pass off to people, how important that is to kind of have those things like maybe that you're documenting as you go through your day to day so that you then can turn into the playbook.
Yeah, it's crucially important to have systems. And I think what's interesting is if you said, okay, I'm going to sit down right now, I'm going to write down all the systems that I have, you'll probably realistically come up with like 30% of what you're really doing. And there are probably all these other systems that actually are happening behind the scenes that you don't realize are systems. And so, one thing I found over the years is when I hire a new team member or hire for a new position, they oftentimes are my best identifier of the systems I have that I didn't realize I had. It's when they ask the questions of, well, how do I know what size art to put there? And I'm like, oh, I guess that's a great question. We do have an answer for that. Let me explain how we decide these things. And so I would say, yes, you need systems in place to hire somebody, but give yourself grace and understand you're probably going to be building the boat the first time
Mhm.
while you are actually training and implementing. And they are going to teach you just as much about your business and what needs to be communicated as you are going to be teaching them about those answers and how to actually execute whatever it is you're hiring them to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's, you know, so, it's like, don't paralyze yourself before, like, don't make, it doesn't have to be perfect for you to go out there and start, expanding if that's what you are wanting to do.
Absolutely. And I think when it comes to training and hiring, the best approach that I've always seen has been let me tell you how I'm doing something. Let's do it together. And I'm here to coach and support you. And then you go do it. And I've got your back. And when you keep transferring the knowledge that way, you give yourself time and grace to transfer that knowledge. You get the intentional time, especially on those first couple hires, to really work hand in hand with each other and support each other. Those transitions run really smooth.
When it comes to hiring people on and expanding, how important, you said, maybe give yourself grace to set those systems and get everything as you go along. But how important is it to have like a core central focus on how we're going to present ourselves or, treat our client base? And, I think that's where like really like having a good, strong foundation of that before you start expanding out.
It's hugely important. I think, and adjacent with that, it's that culture fit. Like, who
Yeah.
are you as an organization? How do you carry yourself publicly in front of your clients, forward facing in your marketing, whatever it may be? Let's make sure we're aligned in that way, because that's not something you should be building as you're going, right? That's something you should go, this is who we are. This is how we represent ourselves. And are you a good representation of that as well? Or are you in alignment with our vision and our values and our goals? Making sure that that alignment is there is a huge part of the hiring process.
Yeah. I mean, I was talking to somebody last week and we were, it takes so long to build up your reputation, but it can so
Yes.
quickly, go away. And that is a scary thing when it comes to adding on new people that you're not necessarily right there with them all the time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, before we wrap up, tell me, where, if somebody's listening to this and wants to see if, one of your franchises in their area, how can they search for that and where can they learn more?
Yeah, you can check us out online at linden-creek.com/franchise for our franchise opportunities, or just check us out at linden-creek.com if you're interested in any of our services or just want to see some fun projects we have going on.
Yeah, absolutely. And then also on, social media and everything like that, there's places to find you as well.
Yes, check us out on Instagram at @lindencreek_.
Awesome. Well, I really do appreciate you taking the time to talk with us today. It's always interesting to have, uh, you know, the all the industries that are kind of wrapped up within real estate, and I think staging is so interesting because, um, you know, it, you're doing things that you can't necessarily, the home seller. Yes, I want your input, but that's not where it's going to come from, and so I think there's a lot of things that our agents can learn from with listening to that kind of stuff.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate this today.
I want to thank Alisa again for joining us today and sharing her insights into the world of home staging and business growth. From buyer psychology and emotional marketing to building scalable systems, there was a lot of value packed into this conversation for agents looking to better market their listings and grow their businesses. If you'd like to learn more about Alisa or Linden Creek, be sure to check out the links in the episode description. Well, that wraps things up for this episode, but remember, follow the show wherever you listen to podcasts and make sure to subscribe to the Smart Agents YouTube channel. Again, I'm Michael Walter, and we'll see you on the next episode.